Now we've already learned that electromagnetic radiation has wave character. In this module we'll learn about its particle character. We have also learned that Planck's radiation law told us that the material of the cavity of the black body has quantized energy levels. So we already know that the material of the cavity has quantized energy levels. Now does electromagnetic radiation itself, does it also have quantized energy levels? Now this is something that we learn about from some other interesting experiments, and these will be described in this module. Then a brief introduction about this module, then we will discuss the nature of electromagnetic radiation and the experiments which told about the particle character, and these experiments were the photoelectric effect, and you know that this experiment was conducted by Einstein and his explanation of the photoelectric effect and his photoelectric equation, and then technology based on this, because if we are describing about this we should also learn about where all it has been applied. So now the question, is light a wave or a particle, because certain experiments had shown that it was like a wave, and now we are talking about its particle nature. And if it is a particle, what do we mean by photons, what are matter waves, and then we will give a brief summary. So these are briefly the topics that we will discuss in this one, and we will review the photoelectric effect, which was an important experiment that could not be explained on the basis of the wave aspect of radiation, a situation that led Einstein to postulate the existence of photons. We also discuss how this could explain observed phenomena related to the photoelectric effect. In addition, the idea of matter waves was put forth by Louis de Broglie, which is also discussed in this module. So you learn about all these. Giving a brief introduction, Max Planck posed the quantum nature of light in 1901 to explain the black body spectrum, you already know that, and this is emitted by an object at a given temperature. It was as a matter of mathematical necessity, not because he was convinced that there is something like quantization, and he did not actually believe in that. But Einstein, on the other hand, took this mathematical trick and interpreted it literally. He said if light could only possess energies which were integer multiples of the Planck's discrete energy, that is the energy is equal to h nu, perhaps light was actually composed of discrete packets, photons, each possessing an energy h nu. So suppose instead of waves you have photons, what does it mean? We begin by giving the introductory paragraphs from Albert Einstein's landmark paper, and this is in German. Let us first look at the photoelectric experiment and its results and understand what led Einstein to make his landmark revelation. Now we will talk about the nature of electromagnetic radiation, the particle character. First we will discuss the photoelectric effect. In 1886 and 1887, Heinrich Hertz observed that ultraviolet, what we commonly called UV light, caused electrons to be emitted from the surface of a metal. And you will remember that he is the person who discovered radio waves. For his experiments to test Maxwell's electromagnetic theory, he required electromagnetic radiation having wavelengths of a few meters, very long wavelength, which could be measured in his laboratory. It was not possible to generate an alternating current of 100 megahertz or so required for this purpose by mechanical generators. So he produced this high frequency AC alternating current by abruptly discharging a condenser, now known as capacitor, in the form of an electric spark. Using his spark gap generator in the figure, he invented the earliest form of radio receiver which works on a spark induced between two small spheres. He used polished brass knobs in the receiver by a spark generated on another two spheres in the transmitter. The freestanding structure on the right was a 2 meter, this long thing was a 2 meter high reflector with a spark gap and short dipole antenna as its focal point. The apparatus on the table was an induction coil to generate a high voltage spark at the gap. His interesting observation was that the sensitivity of his spark gap device could be increased by illuminating it with visible or ultraviolet light. Later, the discovery of the electron by J. J. Thomson confirmed that this increased sensitivity was the result of light pushing out electrons from the metal. Now this was hardly surprising. We know that electromagnetic radiation carries energy, and this could be used to push out the tiny particles of negative charge from the surface of the metal ion to which they were loosely bound anyway. because these were metals. However, subsequent experiments on the photoelectric effect produced amazing results that did not fit into the classical theories and turned physics almost upside down. Now, let us understand the experiments. In 1902, Philip von Leonard, he was his assistant, noticed that the kinetic energy of the emitted electrons was independent of the intensity of the light. This did not make sense at that time. In classical wave theories of light, more intense sources contained more energy that would be transmitted to the outgoing electrons. So, we would expect more intensity to produce higher kinetic energy electrons. Using classical theory, as the intensity of the light increases, the electrons on the surface of the metal should oscillate more vigorously. At some point, the electrons will have sufficient energy to escape the metal. He found that the intensity of the incident light had no effect on the maximum kinetic energy of the photoelectrons. Those ejected from exposure to a very bright light had the same energy as those ejected from exposure to a very dim light of the same frequency. Now, here we come across frequency as the important parameter and not the intensity. In keeping with the law of conservation of energy, however, more electrons were ejected by a bright source than a dim source. The current was proportional to the intensity. Now, later experiments, for example, those by Robert Millikan, revealed another puzzling aspect. Light with frequencies below a certain cutoff value, called the threshold frequency, failed to eject photoelectrons from the metal, no matter how high the intensity of the source. So, this is a kind of device that was used. It was observed that red light, whatever its intensity, did not produce a current, but when blue light, and you know that blue light has higher frequency than red, and even if it had small intensity, it was able to eject the electrons. It did not matter whether the light was bright or dim. What mattered was its frequency, because red light has lower frequency than blue. It is not able to produce the electrons. Let us sum up these observations and try to understand them. First is, only light with a frequency greater than a certain threshold produces a current. So, that means that this frequency is a very important aspect. Current begins almost instantaneously, even for light of very low intensity. So, if it has the right frequency, the current begins almost instantaneously, and even if it has low intensity, the current is proportional to the intensity of the incident light. So, a typical photoelectric experiment could produce the following results. Red light would not produce photoelectrons even if it were bright. Green light, which is intermediate between red and blue, would produce photoelectrons even if it was very dim. Blue light would produce photoelectrons with greater kinetic energy than green than those ejected by the green light. Note that all metals do not eject photoelectrons with visible light. Most require UV radiation. Remember that it has higher frequency, and semiconductors can even produce photoelectrons using near IR radiation, which is of even lower energy. Now, where did the existing theories fail to explain these observations? Let us revisit the classical picture of electromagnetic radiation. Scientists of the 19th century were in no doubt that all electromagnetic radiation is a transverse electromagnetic wave. In fact, we also described it as a wave. Numerous optical phenomena such as diffraction, interference, polarization, reflection and diffraction were evidence for this. All these phenomena can only occur if light is a wave. A wave is an oscillation in space and time, and it transfers energy without transferring matter. In other words, the wave is undergoing simple harmonic motion, also called SHM, for which the energy is proportional to the square of the amplitude. In the case of our electromagnetic wave, the intensity of the radiation is proportional to the square of the amplitude of the electric field. This means that the energy of the wave is proportional to its intensity. Brighter the light, more is its energy. Classical thinking would imagine metals as having a sea of electrons on the surface. A large wave, that is bright light, would push an electron from the surface, while a weak wave, dim light, could not, because it does not have enough amplitude, and the energy is proportional to the square of the amplitude according to classical physics. This wave analogy has no place for frequency. Where is the frequency entering the picture? The photoelectric experiment suggested that tiny ripples could push a board across the Indian Ocean, provided that they had the correct frequency, while tornadoes would do no harm. This is a useful analogy. Now, this was something that physicists at that time could not fathom. How was this that frequency was becoming important and intensity had no place in the photoelectric effect? The second observation, that is that the current begins almost instantaneously, that also had no explanation. Classical thinking would suggest that an electron absorbing low intensity light would start oscillating more rapidly as it absorbed more energy from light, because it would continuously absorb energy, and then as it absorbed more energy it would oscillate more rapidly, but it would continue absorbing light until it had enough energy to escape from the surface. And but this does not happen because it happens instantaneously. It does not wait for enough energy to be absorbed. A high frequency radiation almost instantaneously leads to the production of electrons. As soon as light of high frequency falls on the surface, an electron is ejected in almost no time, that is something like in the space of 1 nanosecond. It was as if in a sea full of boats, all the energy of a wave is expended on a single boat, which kicks off instead of being distributed on all the boats. Now, this is something that classical mechanics had no place for. So, let us see how Einstein explained the photoelectric effect. Now, in 1905, and this is what he conjectured, that light is composed of discrete packets of energy, which he called photons. In fact, he did not call them photons, which were later called photons, and each possesses an energy equal to h nu. If this conjecture were true, it would have the following consequences on the photoelectric effect. When a single photon interacts with a single electron, it can only transfer an energy h nu to that electron, because it only has that energy. Therefore, if the light intensity is increased, the number of electrons emitted should increase, but the kinetic energy of an individual electron will be unchanged, because that depends on the energy. If the energy of an incident photon is less than the binding energy, what is this binding energy? This is the energy that is holding the electron on the surface of the metal, is not allowing it to escape. So, no electron can be emitted, because if you do not provide enough energy for it to escape, it cannot escape. So, even if the intensity, that is the number of the incident photons, is increased, nothing will happen, because these photons do not have the required minimum energy. In practice, we call this binding energy in a metal surface. It is now called the work function, and it is often denoted as phi. Different metals have different work functions, and this is something like the ionization energy. If a photon has an energy greater than the metal's work function, an electron may be emitted, but the maximum kinetic energy the electron can possess after escaping the surface of the metal is equal to the photon energy h nu minus the metal work function, because h nu is its energy, the work function is the energy required to remove the electron, the rest goes as kinetic energy. Now, let us elaborate on the new ideas. Two factors affect the maximum kinetic energy of photoelectrons. The first is the frequency of the incident radiation, and also the material on the surface, because different materials have different work functions. As can be seen from the figure, the three metals potassium, beryllium and titanium have different threshold frequencies, and we know that now that they have different ionization energies. Only potassium has a threshold frequency which is in the visible, the rest require UV radiation. This shows that the threshold frequency is a function of the material. Above the threshold, the electron energy is a linear function of the frequency, but the slope of all three lines is the same, equal to Planck's constant, which shows that the energy frequency relationship is the same for all materials. Now, this very clearly shows that potassium, even for visible radiation, it is able to produce electrons, but as you keep on increasing the frequency of radiation into the UV, more photons with higher kinetic energy will be produced. For beryllium and then for titanium, you require higher energy thresholds, because they have higher work functions. But the slope, all the lines are parallel, that means that the slopes are the same, and this means that the Planck's constant is the same, the energy frequency relationship is the same. The explanation of the photoelectric effect earned Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955. He was born in 1879 and lived till 1955, and he lived in Germany and Switzerland. He got the Nobel Prize of Physics in 1921, and the citation said for services to theoretical physics and especially of the law of the photoelectric effect. So, this was the importance of the photoelectric effect, and let us come to his equation. Einstein's formula relates the maximum kinetic energy, which we call Ek, of the photoelectrons. These were called photoelectrons because they were produced using light and photo, to the frequency of the absorbed photons nu and the threshold frequency nu 0 of the photoemissive surface, the surface of the metal ion. This formula is only approximate, however, and a minor correction is needed for the Compton effect, but we will not bother about that. We will look at the formula. The kinetic energy Ek is equal to Planck's constant multiplied by the frequency of the radiation minus the threshold frequency, or you can also say the energy of the absorbed photons E and the work function phi of the surface. The expression is Ek, the kinetic energy is the energy that you have supplied minus the work function, where the first term is the energy of the absorbed photons E with frequency nu or wavelength lambda, or since energy is equal to h nu, it is also equal to hc by lambda, and the second term is the work function phi of the surface with threshold frequency nu naught or threshold wavelength lambda naught. We can now express the energy required to escape for the electron to escape from the metal phi as h nu naught, because we know that the energy is proportional to the frequency and the Planck's constant is the proportionality constant, and this can also be written as hc by lambda 0. The result of actually performing the experiment is shown in the figures, and you can see that all that we have said up till now can be explained experimentally. The maximum kinetic energy Ek of the photoelectrons and the charge of the photoelectrons, as you know, is denoted by E, can be determined from the stopping potential V, and the figure very nicely shows this. Since V, the potential, is equal to W by Q, that means in this case the energy is equal to Ek divided by the charge, which is equal to E. That means we can say that the kinetic energy is equal to E multiplied by the potential EV. If the electron charge is expressed in Coulomb, the energy will turn out to be in joules, or Ek is equal to half mv squared minus phi is equal to h nu minus phi, and h nu naught is equal to phi. So, the work function that we talked about is equal to h nu naught, as we had already said. The rate, which can be expressed as n by t, that is the number of electrons per unit time in which photoelectrons with charge E are emitted from a photoemissive surface, can be determined from the photoelectric current, and you can see from this figure, which shows that the maximum kinetic energy as a function of the frequency of light, and this is shown for zinc. You can see that it turns out to be a straight line. The photoelectric effect is widely used as an experimental tool today. There is an entire field of study known as photoelectron spectroscopy, where monochromatic light sources ranging from the visible to X-rays are used to photoexcite electrons from a given sample, that is, it could be a metal, semiconductor or insulator. The energy distribution of the emitted electrons is measured. Because of Einstein's explanation of the photoelectric effect, the researcher can then work backwards, since the photon energy is known, and determine the binding energy that a detected electron originated from within the sample. This skill has been used to study the conduction electrons of high temperature superconductors, to understand the interactions at interfaces between metals and semiconductors used in electronic devices, and to investigate chemical reactions that take place on the surfaces of metals. This is of great interest in the field of catalysis. As you know, today we are looking at catalysis to solve some of the problems, something like green chemistry, which tries to eliminate waste, use less energy, and so on. And so these experiments are playing a great role in that. Coming to the technology, the photoelectric effect has been translated to technology, as in the electric eye, that is light meter, movie film or audio track. Photoconductivity, what you see is that an increase in the electrical conductivity of a non-metallic solid when exposed to electromagnetic radiation, the increase in conductivity is due to the addition of free electrons liberated by collision with photons. The rate at which the electrons are generated and the time over which they remain free determines the amount of the increase. So, you see even in non-metals this is being used. Photovoltaics, the ejected electron travels through the emitted material to enter a solid electrode in contact with the photoemitter. Instead of traveling through a vacuum to an anode, leading to the direct conversion of radiant energy to electrical energy, and your familiar photostatic copying, that also uses the principle of photoelectric effect. After studying all this, we have learned that light behaved like a wave, but now we were talking about light as a particle throughout this module. Now we ask a quick question, is light a wave or a particle? Let us settle that. First, let us see what are photons. The answer is that it can behave both as photon, as particle as well as wave, depending upon what question you ask. If you are looking for a wave aspect, if you design an experiment that is looking at the wave aspect, it will behave like that. And if you design an experiment as a particle aspect, it will behave like a particle. Light may show properties of a wave or of a particle called a photon. The term photon was proposed by G. N. Lewis in 1926. Now let us see light as a wave. What are the characteristics? Nu into lambda is equal to C. Light as a particle E is equal to h nu, and it is then called a photon. Let us examine the evidences that we have produced for both. In 1680, Newton explained light as a particle of energy. If you remember, he called them corpuscles. In reflection and refraction, light behaved as a particle. Young in 1800 showed that light interfered with itself. Therefore, it must be a wave, because this is a property of waves. Reflection and refraction could be explained by light being a wave. In 1850, Maxwell showed that light is a form of high frequency electromagnetic wave. This is towards the wave character of light. Einstein in 1905 showed that in the photoelectric effect, light causing electrons to be emitted from a metal surface, the experiment we described just now, light must act as a particle. Now in 1900, Planck developed a model that explained light as a quantization of energy. Energy of a light wave is present in bundles of energy called photons. The energy is said to be quantized into the photons. So what are these photons? They have the following characteristics. They move with the speed of light. They have no mass. They are electrically neutral. They carry momentum, and the momentum is given by the symbol P, and this is equal to h nu by C. Energy of a photon or electromagnetic wave, energy is equal to h nu as we know, and we can also write as hc by lambda, because for a wave nu into C is nu into lambda is equal to C. This equation relates the energy of each photon of the radiation to the electromagnetic wave characteristics nu and lambda. Therefore, light must be regarded as having a dual nature. So we come to the conclusion that it is both a wave as well as a particle. So it has dual nature. In some cases light acts as a wave, in other it acts like a particle. But remember this, that the quantized nature of light is most important when considering absorption and emission of electromagnetic radiation, otherwise you would not be able to explain all that. So what we will be focusing on is the photon characteristic of light, and that we will use in different kinds of spectroscopy that we will learn over different modules. On the macroscopic scales, we can treat a large number of photons as a wave. So when you have a large number of photons, the whole set of photons behave like waves. When dealing with subatomic phenomena, we are often dealing with a single photon or a few. In this case, you cannot use a wave description of light, it does not work. So let us look at some problems that you can solve using that. A light bulb of 100 watts emits at 0.5 mu, that is micrometer. How many photons are emitted per second? Let us see, because when you are looking at a light bulb, are you looking at a single photon? No, looking at a collection of photons. The energy of one photon, as you know, and I am using a small epsilon here because when you are talking about a single photon, we talk in terms of epsilon photon is equal to hc naught by lambda. We want to find out what is the number of photons emitted per second, and this can be written as the energy, that is 100 joules per second, and multiplied by its wavelength, and that divided by h. So, we substitute all these values and we find that it is a huge number, 2.517 into 10 raised to the power of 20. And so, this is large number of photons is required because Planck's constant h is very small, because energy is equal to h nu. So, if you want to produce a particular value of the energy you need nh nu, you will need a very large value of n. Now, finally, we will talk about matter waves, and because this is also very important to our subject. Louis de Broglie in 1924, we have reached the 20th century, he extended the concept and proposed that if light can wave as and a particle, why cannot matter also act as waves? He gave the idea of matter waves and hypothesized that the wavelength associated with a particle of mass m moving with a speed v is given by lambda is equal to h by mv. The wavelength is given by the Planck's constant divided by the momentum, and the momentum is equal to p by v, lambda is equal to h by p, where p is the momentum of the particle. And this is a very interesting story. During his PhD viva voce examination, that how his idea of matter waves could be verified, because this was just a theoretical presumption. He said that the wavelengths that he had calculated and for the electrons, these would be comparable to the crystal spacings, and this could cause diffraction. So, because they were waves, they could cause diffraction. And as soon as they heard about this, Davison and Germer, they devised an experiment and they accelerated electrons into a crystal and observed wave diffraction as could be seen with X-rays. So, that means that the electrons were behaving like waves, and for this hypothesis de Broglie was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1927. So, we will discuss another problem and calculate the de Broglie wavelength for an electron in an electron microscope accelerated with a potential of 100 volt. So, first what do we have? A charge q is accelerated through a potential v, it acquires the kinetic energy Ek is equal to q into v. Classical physics tells us this. Therefore, the kinetic energy is equal to the charge of an electron, which is 1.602 into 10 raised to the power of minus 19 coulomb, and into 100 volts, and because the potential that was used was 100 volts, and we get 1.602 into 10 raised to the power of minus 17, and the unit is joule because coulomb into volt is joule. So, the kinetic energy can be related to the linear momentum, because the kinetic energy is equal to half mv square and p is equal to mv. Therefore, you can write down that p is equal to square root of 2me and substitute all the values, and you get momentum in kg meter per second. Hence, according to the de Broglie relation, the lambda is equal to 1.123 into 10 raised to the power of minus 10 meter. So, as you know that the spacings in crystals are of the order of angstrom, which is 10 raised to the power of minus 10 meter. So, this is similar to the spacings in the electrons, and this is what de Broglie had correctly predicted. So, now we have wave particle duality. X-rays and electrons show similar behavior. That means that both of them are behaving like waves. So, you get a pattern using X-ray, a similar pattern using electron diffraction, which till now we were thinking as a particle. So, this is like the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you have learnt about that, if you have read that classical story, that there was a Dr. Jekyll who behaved like Mr. Hyde at night, and he did all sorts of horrible things. So, the electron can also behave like a wave sometimes, as a particle sometimes. So, electrons can be manipulated by light. Electrons wiggle up and down as light passes by. It is a transverse wave. This is what we learnt about right in the beginning. And all matter gets where its wave can go, but appears as a particle when it gets there. Until it gets there, it is wherever it is diffuse matter wave is. It makes its own matter wave like God's surface. Nothing in our everyday life behaves this way, but this is true for atom sized particles. We are not familiar with all these phenomena because we have not we do not experience them in our everyday life. But when you are looking at these sub-microscopic particles that we are talking about electrons and photons and atoms and so on, and then it is very true for these particles. Now, fortunately, it does not apply to larger size particles. Imagine everybody having a wave associated with it and using it to travel anywhere. this would be very, very strange, because the momenta are too large for the wavelength. Obviously, since the wavelength lambda is equal to h by p, if the mass is large, the momentum is very large, because momentum is equal to mv, and that is why the wavelength is so small that you cannot even see it. For diffraction, it should be for similar size particles. For the electrons, we saw that the wave was of the order of 1 angstrom, and this is the size of spacing in crystals. So, you could see diffraction, but when it is in 10 to the power of minus a very large number, you will not be able to observe this wave. So, you do not see people spontaneously breaking into a rainbow, because at that time you can imagine what kind of confusion there was. People were talking about the wave characteristics of light, and they were talking about the particle characteristics of light. That was difficult to understand, but still one could come to terms with it. But when you talk about matter and that also behaving like wave, is something that it takes a lot of thinking before you can assimilate it. So, the scientists were very confused at that time, but now we have to understand that both matter and why I talked about de Broglie hypothesis was because this is what the combination of the wave characteristic and the particle characteristic of matter is what led to Schrodinger equation, and the rest, all spectroscopy is an application of Schrodinger equation, but although it is an experimental science. So, we needed to understand that the light behaving both as a wave and a particle is also something that we will come across. So, in summary, we have discussed the photoelectric experiments. They produced amazing results that did not fit into the classical theories and turned physics upside down. The kinetic energy of the emitted electrons was found to be independent of the intensity of the light. The light with frequencies below a certain cutoff value, called the threshold frequency, failed to eject photoelectrons from the metal, and it did not matter how high the intensity of the source was. Two factors that affect the maximum kinetic energy of photoelectrons are the frequency of the incident radiation and the material of the surface. And light may show properties of a wave or of a particle called a photon. Louis de Broglie gave the idea of matter waves, and hypothesized that the wavelength associated with a particle of mass m moving with a speed v is given by lambda is equal to h by mv, and this is equal to h by p, where p is the momentum of the particle.